Hey, everybody. Welcome to the first bonus episode of the Solitary Practice Podcast. Learning experience for all of us, I suppose, as this is the first one I've done. We'll see how it goes. I'm not sure exactly how often I'll do these, but I thought maybe I would do a little, supplemental or bonus episode because I wanted to talk a little bit about my travels when I go out and I'm moving about the other planes and everything. I haven't really touched on it, and I thought it might be interesting to do some bonus segments talking about, different experiences, different places, how I keep track of them, that kind of thing. So today I think we're just kind of going to jump in and we'll see where we end up by the time I wrap this up. Back in the early 90s, I was really kind of getting started. I had been traveling around magically for a while, and you got to remember this is like pre-computers, no cell phones. Pen and paper was kind of it. There were still landline telephones. It was a long time ago, I guess, for a lot of people. So at that point, I had been traveling to other planes, and I was starting to notice intersections between different places that I was. So I would be in one place and you'd kind of pick up on like a little, we're gonna say an energetic tone or feeling where you could sense that there was an overlap or an intersection point. I like to call them intersection points. You can call them whatever you want to call them. And so I was picking up on that. The other thing I had noticed is that some places I would go to one place and then I would come back a while later. And while I was not in the exact same place, I was on the same plane, but in a different area. And so there's a certain resonance there, and you can tell that you are in the same place but a different area. And it occurred to me that maybe I ought to try to crack that somehow. There's no real assignment behind it, there's no real purpose behind it. I was just more or less thinking, well, I would kind of like to see if there's any correlation or if maybe there's a trend here. I trend things, I can't help myself. So I started to keep track of it, but of course, again, pre-internet days, there wasn't really a good way to keep track of it. So I got a ton of loose leaf because we always had loose leaf around the house, and started every time I went, I would come back and, once I got things kind of leveled out, I would try to do it as soon after I got back as possible. I would record whatever the experience was, even if it was short. I would jot it down. And when I jotted it down, I was trying to pick up on all of the things. Now there's certain things that will basically kind of like trigger a memory of being there, and it it can be very real, but I wanted to record how it felt, what I saw, colors, any smells that I noticed, like literally down to the smallest detail that I could possibly record it. If you didn't like writing, this was not the job for you. But I don't mind writing it all down, and so every time I would go and come back, I would write it down. And I did that, well, well, well into the 2000s. And then I went through a phase where my practice changed a little bit and I was not actively traveling around, so there wasn't so much to record there. I mean, there was some, but it was very sporadic for a number of years, and then it picked back up again as things are wont to do. And so I went back to recording it. At that point we had all the wonderful things like the internet and computers and digital everything, and I could have typed it out, but I'm a little old fashioned, so I keep writing it down, and I'm still doing it today. I have just volumes of this stuff written down, and so I track it. And again, I try to do it as soon after I get back as possible. The longer you wait, the harder it is to pull all the little detail. Things, your brain is doing lots of stuff and it's harder to pull back. Also, you're back here on the physical plane and it is sluggish to think. I like to get up a couple, and I say up, but it's not really up. It's just, I like to get off plane and into a little bit of a higher level because it's much easier to think there. But unfortunately, you can't physically write while you're there. So anyway, I like to write everything down as soon as I get back, and then from there I track it. For all of these years, I basically just kind of like wrote it down and I want to say forgot about it, but I didn't pay any more attention to it. I didn't really forget it. I just didn't really pay attention to it. Over time, I had started to kind of, I guess, build myself a little map of where things were in relation to each other. Because again, there's no real up, down, left, right, north, south, east, west. Like, that doesn't apply here. I can tell where one place is in relation to another place, generally speaking. And sometimes there's some overlap and things bend. You get into more dimensions than we've got here. So I'm going to say there's flex to it. It can be in more than one place at once. It can be at more than one time at once. It's not like I can sit down here at the desk and draw out a map. It is more of a I have a mental map, I guess maybe we're going to call it that way, and I can trace things that way. At one point, I did try literally, physically mapping it all out. I used some tracing paper and I had like tabs, and anyway, it looked like a very deranged accordion by the time I was done because things move in and out and then things overlap on certain planes. It became quite the odd looking thing, especially if you record something on that map and then 2 years later you're back there and you do something else and it expands out a section and has all this additional detail. You can't really squish it into the small place that you allotted it originally. So anyway, physical maps not particularly working, but I do basically map out where I've been, where the gaps are, and some of those are not actually even gaps because again, time, space, very flexible. So they move and change. But I have this whole in-depth little mapping system that I use. I don't know if anybody's really noticed, but with the podcast, I'm listed under the name The Map Maker. I didn't choose that name. That name was given to me. I've got a lot of names, but that's kind of how that name showed up. I kind of map out all these places that I've been and keep little notes on them, what I ran into, what I met, any little jobs I've done. So I have this wonderful mapping system, and what I tend to do is tie memories of the experience to those pinpoints. So when I'm looking at this map, I can basically tap into it. Over time, your memories fade, you get distracted, life comes up. I want to be able to go back and re-trigger not so much the memory, but like the experience. I want to re-trigger that, and so that I can walk through it again, because there have been certain times when years down the road, things have become clearer to me, and I've thought to myself, oh, I'd like to go back and have another look at that, because I think the answer is back there, and I've known it for years. I just didn't know that I knew it. So being able to go back and re-trigger that whole experience again is handy. I don't really want to redo it. I just want to kind of like walk through and be able to have a look at it. And the other thing is I'm not necessarily restrained by looking through my eyes as I went through it the first time. I can kind of be like standing off to the side and I can watch how I interacted and those kind of things. About a year ago, just for kicks and giggles, I pulled out some of the really old stuff, some of the first stuff I had written down. I hadn't looked at it again. Like, I write it down and I toss it in there and I don't look at it again. So I have not looked at any of this stuff in like 20 years or better. And I pulled it out and started to look at it. I'm much more detailed now. I know what I need to record, what I'm going to want to know later, things that I guess my frequently asked questions. I know to answer them when I write things down. When I was first getting started, I didn't really know what I needed to know. I just knew I wanted to record it somehow. So there's definitely a different flavor to those earlier entries, but I was able to go back and look at certain early travels and find the overlaps in more recent travels that I hadn't necessarily put together. One of the things I like to do when I have quote unquote free time is visit, and again, we're just going to use physical plain words for this because not everything applies, but visit markets or vendor stalls when I'm out and about. Different planes have different things, but there's usually some form of commerce going on wherever you are. Maybe not where you are at that point in time, but somewhere on that plane, there's usually some form of commerce. And if I have time, I just kind of like to walk and look at the different things. And so there had been a point very early on in which I was on a separate plane, and it was a little different, but it had a lot of similarities to here. And I had been traveling along this river. I was kind of struggling with it. I was not it was not easy. It was kind of brushy and the terrain was terrible, and I eventually managed to make my way up to like a particular, I'm going to say path. It wasn't really a road, it was more like a path area, and then had proceeded on to there to again, I'm going to call it a town. I don't really know. It's not, at the time it was very small. It was like a cluster of buildings where the resident entities were. And I had kind of like briefly written that down. There doesn't seem to be, at least I didn't write it down, and when I kind of replay that whole thing, I don't find that I was actually purposely doing anything there. It was one of those things where I happened to be there, and the whole goal was to just kind of like travel along and then get myself home. Again, it was earlier in the travels and me learning to get out around, so not so much purpose driven back then, is more of a practice driven kind of thing. But more recently, I've been there again, and when I think about it, I'm like, oh, that cluster of rock, so familiar. And I saw it this last time I was there. I should have known, but I didn't. I had bigger fish to fry because I was actually there on a purpose this round. But anyway, I had actually gone back and I thought, well, that's interesting. That's one overlap. And so then I went through all of my records, and I found a lot of overlap between where I went when I was kind of like getting picked up and dropped off, and where I've been. I'm going to say in more recent years, but the year span is like probably like a decade. Some of those places have changed significantly, and some of them have not really changed at all. It just is kind of interesting to me. And then of course the methodology for getting there is different now. Before I was getting picked up and dropped off, and now I get the little go here pinpoint, and then I go over there. Those pinpoints, like when I get a go here and do something pinpoint, they don't necessarily correspond on my map until I get there. Once I get there and I'm like, oh, it's here, then the I guess mental mapping system that I have kind of snaps into place, and I can kind of orient where I am based on that current location. I need that one point of reference. Can obviously relate, I'm here on the physical plane, I need to go to whatever point and do whatever. That makes sense. But where that point is in relation to my mapping system doesn't really correlate until I get there, and I can kind of snap the map into place and know where I am. And one of the helpful things about that is once I've done that, now I have we're going to say a broad database of where the overlaps are. So if I need to slip from plane to plane, plane to plane to plane, sometimes there are little twists or overlaps. They're much easier to access when you kind of already know where they are. And I can plan that into whatever activities I have. If I think that I'm going to want to kind of disappear out of a place pretty quick rather than coming all the way back here, I could just slip over a plane or two, hop a dimension, whatever, and go somewhere else and do something else. And for a while, I did have a kick where I was going around and actively hunting for the overlaps and actively mapping them. It had come in handy during one experience. And so I had thought to myself, well, that'd be a good project. I should go and find as many of these little overlaps as I can and then use them. One of the other, I guess, fun aspects of this is sometimes some of these planes, you can kind of move through them, but they have other planes overlaid that are extremely similar. And again, these are my terms. I don't know if they're technically the correct terms. They're just how I refer to them. So you can be in a place where you have a little, I don't know, so just say you've got a little house somewhere, and you've got a little road to this house. It could be overlaid with the same little road and the same little house, but like on a different plane, but it's all kind of layered onto itself. And you can move up and down through that. And I say up and down, it could be left and right, whatever. You can kind of move between them. So sometimes when you're working, maybe when you come down that little road from your little house, maybe there's a bigger road and that takes you into a little town. But maybe if you're on a different level of it, just the river is there and not the town. So you're working between all of them. I have no idea if this is making sense to anybody. It makes perfect sense to me because I can actually visualize it. It's just a little bit difficult to visualize it and then talk about it and have it make sense. But anyway, one of the things I found is sometimes I'll be on one level and have a whole experience there. And then I'll come back again. I'm like, oh, it's the house with the little road. And it is, but it's also not because you're on a different level. And when you go, what you think is going to be there is not actually there. And it can throw you for a loop until you get used to the fact that you're kind of moving between the levels on the plane. And there was this one particular, I don't even know, I'm going to call it a plane again, but it's a totally different use of the word plane, where when you wanted to travel somewhere, I had met with a number of entities. We had had a very nice evening, lots of discussion, how things were done, how things weren't done, best uses for energy, best types of energy to use for different things. A very interesting conversation. And so I wanted to get ready to go to another location with 4 or 5 of these entities so that we were going to continue talking, and the others were pretty much done for the quote unquote night. But in order to travel, and we're all on the same plane there, but in order to go from the one location to the other location on the same plane, you actually had to move up and down. And again, I'm just using up and down. It's not really literally up and down amongst the energy fields of the planes and everything to get to the other location. It's back on the same original plane, but you have to move. A very odd experience. And it was a lot to kind of wrap my head around, but depending on, which ones you move through in what order would depend on where you came out. So yeah, it was, you don't want to mess up the sequence, that's for sure. But I learned eventually how to do that. And when I'm there now, I don't really have so much difficulty getting through that kind of maze of trying to move from place to place. So I think I'll kind of wrap up there for now. I'm not sure how often I'll do these, but my kind of tentative thought is to maybe pick a location I've been at or an experience I've had somewhere, and I will periodically put out one of these little bonus episodes on that location. There seems to be, I don't know, some interest. I notice when I look at the statistics on the podcast, seems like there's a bump whenever I'm talking about actual experiences that I've had on other planes. There seems to be an interest in that. If there's not, somebody let me know and I will stop talking about it. But so I will try when I do bonus episodes going forward is I will try to pick something about the travels and talk about it, and we'll go from there, see how that works. It doesn't seem like it's working, I'll find something else. But anyway, have a great weekend, everybody, and I will talk to you on Thursday.